Let's make a bowl with a lid. Hello, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today we're going to make a bowl with a lid, and not just any bowl with any lid. We're going to make this a little bit unique. I have a couple pieces of wood here that are pretty cool. This is magnolia that I salvaged from Hurricane Irma almost 4 years ago. And I have a piece of spalted sycamore, which surprised me. I was actually going through my wood supply in the shed and I found some long logs that I stored of sycamore. And I gotta be honest, I was being a little bit lazy. I left these logs in long form. And the idea is that the ends crack, that maybe the inside will be okay still. So you cut off the ends and then you use what's in the inside. Well, believe it or not, this sycamore didn't crack at all. It didn't crack on the end grain at all. So the entire piece of wood is usable and it has this beautiful spalt in it. Now, if you know anything about sycamore, sycamore is a really nice wood to turn. You can do a lot of really cool things with sycamore. It's not super hard, but it's not soft. It's nice to turn, but it's kind of plain. The spalt makes this absolutely beautiful. So I'm excited to get started on this project. We're gonna do, the bowl is gonna be made with the magnolia. This I actually found in a ditch. I kid you not, these are laying in a ditch. It's this beautiful, really light colored wood. So I'm gonna turn the bowl out of this and then I'm gonna make the lid with the spalted sycamore, and we're gonna use the spalting as kind of the highlight or the feature on the lid. So when I'm thinking with the design of this bowl, I'm thinking I'm gonna have a somewhat traditional bowl shape, and I'm going to put a little recessed lip on the inside of the bowl. And then I'm gonna have the lid actually be concave. So it's gonna go down into the bowl. And what I'd really like to do is have the edge of the bowl and the rim have a continuous downward concave curve into the top of the bowl. And then I'm gonna make a small handle on top of the lid that mimics the shape of the bowl. So let's go ahead and grab this magnolia and let's get started and see what we come up with. Okay, so I'm going to use my 4-spur drive center here, and I'm going to mount the bowl blank between centers. Now, I wouldn't do this with a very large bowl blank, but a medium-sized bowl blank like this is great to mount with the drive center. One of the big advantages of using that drive center is that, and the tailstock, is that we can easily come back and make minor adjustments. So if I start turning and realize that the bowl isn't balanced as well as it could be, I could just loosen the tailstock and make some subtle adjustments. All right, the first cuts I'm going to make are with my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. You guys probably are used to hearing me say 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. Well, that's because those are the two main tools that I use. They're basically the same. There's a 5/8 inch and a 1/2 inch. I use the 5/8 inch like I am here for roughing and just quickly removing, whoa, that was a lot of bark that just went flying off. Yeah, I use the 5/8 inch for roughing away material and clearing off and making the general shape. And then I use the 1/2 inch bowl gouge for the detail work and making the final cuts. So I knocked off those corners and took off a big chunk of bark. And I'm going to move the tails, you can see the bark there on the floor. I'm going to move the tails, or the tool rest, in so that I've got good support here. You can see I've got about a 3/4 of an inch or an inch gap. And I'm just going to remove that material and clear up the sides of this bowl blank. I'm going to clear up the face here as well. Now, I could have chiseled out the bark on the outside of this, and that would have helped me have a better connecting point with the tailstock. I'm going to need to take that nub off before I create the tenon for this bowl. In general, what's nice about the end-to-end or the drive center and the tailstock is you can just throw a bowl blank up there really quickly and start roughing it. All right, so the curve's coming together nicely. There's like a really long fibrous material underneath the bark that's interesting. So this is Florida magnolia. I don't know the botanical name for this tree, but this is the magnolia that has the great big shiny leaves that we have in Florida. I found these logs in a ditch. This was after I believe Hurricane Irma. I don't know. I collect wood whenever there's a hurricane that occurs near us and there's trees down. I think it was Hurricane Irma. I was driving around with my trailer gathering wood, and I drove past this property, and there were just beautiful logs that were really light colored on the ends, and I looked at them and I thought, wow, I wonder if somebody's picking that up. And I just kind of piled up with all the other debris. Somebody took the time to cut these in nice lengths and everything. I just threw them on the trailer and brought them back, and then split them in half, and then I've set them aside, and they've dried ever since, and they're very stable. So there's that nub that I mentioned. I need to knock that off and just take a chisel and knock it off. It's that simple. So I'm going to take a couple seconds and make sure I hit the same points with the spur drive center and make sure that that's lined up, and then I'll bring the tailstock up. And then I just use that little circle that I have there as to kind of eyeball the center. We're not lining up anything precise yet, but we want to be relatively close to what we were turning before. So these logs were brought back, and I cut them lengthwise in half and cut the pith area out. And that's something that I detail in my new course, my new online e-course, Treatable Understanding Green Wood Turning. We go over all the details of how to process raw wood and get the best results, so you don't have cracking and you don't have waste with your wood. I'm pretty excited. The course is out now, and we've got a big audience that's already in the course, and I'm excited to share the material because there's a lot of great information about how to process wood properly. And there are a lot of myths out there that people spread about what to do and what not to do, and it really depends on your particular environment. But what happened was I split these logs in half, which relieved the tension from the pith area, and I stacked them up and kind of forgot about them. And the ends were sealed, and they've held up really well. This wood is very hard, and it is definitely equalized or dry. There's no such thing as dry with wood, but there's equalization so that the moisture content inside the bowl is down as low as it's going to get for the particular environment that it's in. So I'm going to clean up the face of the bottom here. And it's a beautiful wood. It's very dense. It's actually kind of similar to poplar in its appearance. Now I've stepped down to my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. And you can see here I'm making a much lighter cut. That's going to give me a much smoother finish. I'm going to go ahead and mark where the tenon will be. And then I'll remove material for the tenon and the shoulder. I like to establish the tenon and the shoulder relatively early. This is a personal preference. I don't know that I express this enough in my videos. I do on my website at turnawoodbowl.com. Whatever works for you and is getting good results, or the results you want, then stick with doing it. Many of the things that we do out of habit based on how we learned or who we learned from, and there's nothing wrong with that. If it works and you're safe and you're getting good results, then stick with it. What I like to do is I like to create the tenon in the shoulder, and the reason I like to do that is visually it establishes the shape, or at least the base of the shape of the bowl. So right now I can see where the bottom of this bowl is going to be located, and I can start removing material like I'm doing here to shape the bowl to the curve and the look that I want to achieve. Basically, I'm connecting the shoulder point A to point B, which is the rim, in the shape and configuration that I want to see on the final bowl. It's that simple. So I'll move the tool rest around to the side, and now I have a lot of material plus some voids from the shape of the bowl blank that I need to remove. So I'm going to go back to my 5/8 inch bowl gouge. I'm not trying to get a finishing cut with this, I'm just trying to get a roughing cut, and I'm going to rough this material away. You can see the direction I'm moving is from right to left, and I angle the bowl gouge towards the cut. If the flute of the bowl gouge pointing up is 12 o'clock, I have the tip of the bowl gouge right now at about the 10 o'clock position when I'm making these passes. And I have the handle positioned downward somewhat. And that's creating a slicing cut on the left tip of the bowl gouge, if you see here. I'm not engaging much of the tip of the bowl gouge, just a small portion is doing the cutting. This wood is very hard and dense, so I need to return to the grinding station or the sharpening station and sharpen these tools frequently. If you have any questions about tool sharpening, be sure to check out my online tool sharpening course. We cover all of the bases of how to not only sharpen tools, but shape them as well. So if you want to do the 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge like I have here, you can make this grind yourself. There are some places that sell some bowl gouges that are already established with that grind, but you can get a regular bowl gouge and create that particular bevel angle and shape all by yourself. Again, check out my online tool sharpening course. And what's so great about that is you can start learning right now. It's available to you. You sign up, you log in, and you can start learning exactly how to properly sharpen and shape your tools as well. But sharp tools are definitely essential, especially with hardwood like this. People tell me, well, I've got this dry wood that's really hard and I don't think I can turn it. Well, if you have dull tools, you probably won't be able to turn it. You need a good sharp bowl gouge to cut through this wood. And you also need to pay attention to what's happening. Right now, when I return from the sharpening station to the bowl, I'm getting a beautiful cut, and this is just exactly what I'm looking for right here. However, in the matter of a few minutes, that cut is going to change because the edge is dulling. The biggest thing you need to do is be aware that your tool is changing and the quality is changing of the cut. So if that occurs, you simply just go back over to the sharpening station and tune up the edge. And if you do it frequently like that, you only have to bring it to the sharpening station just briefly to bring that edge and restore it, and then you can get back to turning. You can see I'm getting a decent cut here. Now the wood is dry, so when the in-grain fibers go around, those are making relatively small shavings, but the side grain is curling up, and those are making the longer curly shavings. I don't think I would want to scrape this or use a scraper on the hard wood like this, because I think it would tear it up and it would be a really tough turning process. Plus you're going to make a lot of dust. Okay, so there's still a little bit of a void or an inset area on the side of this bowl. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes and establish my outer, widest, most diameter here. And I still have that void right here. So I need to take the top edge down just a little bit so that I have a complete round piece. And there you can see the tenon, the shoulder, and the base of the bowl and how I'm creating that shape coming up to the rim. And while I'm up here, I'm going to take away a little bit of the top material. You see the top material is kind of, looks like it's flapping around there. Well, there's some high spots and low spots, and that's why you're seeing that fluctuation up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that top edge down so that I can establish the top edge of the bowl. Now I can clearly see where the top edge is that I'm working with. And now that I have the rim to the width I need to make that curve continuous. Now what I'm doing here is a pulling, scraping cut to smooth out that transition from the base, or what's the shoulder right now, which will become the foot of the bowl. I need to smooth out the transition from the shoulder up to the curve. So I use a pulling cut to pull out that curve. Now I'm using a push cut to go up the side of the bowl. Here you can see the shape. Now as you're watching this on the top or bottom, I'm looking across the bowl, not at my tool. I'm looking across the bowl at the shape, the outside shape of the bowl as I'm making that cut, so I can see that I'm on track for the shape that I want. That's looking good. I've got a little bit of a high spot down towards the bottom right there. So what I'm going to use here is a shear scrape, and the shear scrape is just going to shave away a little bit of material. I'm going to shave that high spot away so I have a really nice smooth transition from the bottom of the bowl into the side of the bowl. And shear scrape makes these really fine shavings. And I'm going to pick up a real gentle, thin push cut here, and I'm using my 1/2 inch bowl gouge. This is, again, for detail work. My smaller bowl gouge is used for making these nice, final, finishing cuts across the base of the bowl. Again, we're working from right to left. You can see how I have the tool pointed to the left in the direction of the cut. I'm going to work up the side of the bowl and make the final shape for the exterior of the bowl. Now you really want to take your time and make the exterior of the bowl the shape you want it to be, because the outside shape of the bowl is the bowl. What do I mean by that? Well, it's what you feel, it's what you see, it's everything for the bowl. So the more time you take to make the outside of the bowl the shape you want, the better the bowl is going to be.
If you're liking this video, do me a favor and click that like button below the screen. And while you're there, subscribe if you're not already. Thanks.
Okay, I used my spindle detail gouge there to create the dovetail on the tenon. And now I'm going to take the drive center out and put the 4-jaw chuck on, and we'll mount this, reverse it, and mount it to the tenon we just created. Now you can see that uneven top surface. Well, we're going to remove that. I'm pulling the tailstock up here for some added support. And I'm making simple push cuts across the face of this to level off that material and get the bowl surface down to the height that I want it to be. What's nice about working with large logs like this is we have a lot of material to work with. We have enough material to make the tenon, the shoulder, and typically there's extra material up on the top of the bowl, so you can remove and get down to the actual shape that you want here. And I'm working down to the top rim height all the way across the center of the bowl. Now this bowl is a little bit different in that I'm going to be making a lid for it, so we actually have an opportunity here, which is kind of cool. Because the lid is going to be concave and I'm removing the inside of the bowl, I can take a couple seconds and just mimic the shape that the lid will have on the top of this bowl by creating a concave surface on the top of the bowl before I remove the interior. And that's going to give me the opportunity to kind of preview what the lid will look like on this bowl. So instead of just coring this out quickly, I'm going to take the surface down and create a concave face so I can take a look at this, and actually we'll be able to get a measurement off of it as well. All right, so we'll take the tailstock out of the way. And I'll move the tool rest. You always want to stop the lathe when you move the tool rest, just so you don't get bound up in it. There's pinch points and that, it can cause some problems. So you turn off the lathe and then move your tool rest, and it's just a good practice to get into. There are times where if I just have to nudge the tool rest a little bit, I might do it with the lathe going, but I try not to do that too much. Okay, I'm going to bring the tailstock back up just to have it there for extra support. I'm down to the final rim height. And now I'm going to start making the concave shape inside the rim. Now I'm using my 1/2 inch bowl gouge here. Because of the size of this bowl gouge, I'm able to make a smaller cut, a smaller passing cut. So it just means I need to make more passes to remove the material. That's part of the reason why we use a larger bowl gouge, because it can make a wider cut and it can remove bulk material quickly. Here I'm just trying to make more precise cuts to determine the overall shape and look of this piece. It's a little hard to see here, but I'm actually making the top of this concave at the moment. There you can see the concave shape. And that's what I'm looking for. It's not going to be dramatically concave, like pushed way in. It's just going to be this subtle downward curve on the top of the bowl. And it's interesting because the grain direction is downward, so it's just like turning the inside of a bowl basically. It's just a very shallow, wide bowl. So by taking a little bit of time here and making this shape, I can actually confirm that this is the design that I'm looking for. It's kind of like a template or a preview of what we're going to be doing for the lid. But there's also one other aspect of why I did this. And there's what I was talking about. I moved it without turning off the lathe. So I broke my own rule there, or a safety rule. It's not my rule. It's a good rule of thumb, a safety rule, to stop the lathe before you move the tool rest. I like this shape a lot. I like the curve of the bowl, and I like this subtle downward turn. Okay, so I'm kind of fussing here. It's not going to be our final piece that we're using, but I just want to make sure that that curve is what I'm looking for. So what I can do now is I can lay the bowl gouge across there, which is straight, and take a measurement. And I'm actually using millimeters here because it's a little bit easier to see. It's 14 millimeters deep. Okay, so I'm going to use the technique that I usually use, which is to work from the rim down to the center and establish the wall thickness. Now we have a couple things to be thinking about here. I need to establish the wall thickness, and I need to leave enough space for that inside lip that will be created for the lid to sit down into. So I'm making light cuts here to remove material and create that little ditch alongside the inside of the wall. Now with really dry wood like this, we don't have to be super concerned with the flexing of the exterior walls. Now the bigger the bowl and the thinner the walls, then yes, we do. No matter how dry that wood is, we need to make sure that we're not getting flexing when we're turning. But in general, that center core that you're seeing there now is really stabilizing this piece. Okay, now I'm going to make the push cut that establishes the lip for the lid to set down into. And I'm going to bring my detail spindle gouge up. The camera was out of focus for this shot, and I apologize for that. There we go. All right, so I'm using my 1/2 inch bowl gouge here. This is the 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. I hope that you guys understand that
You don't need a ton of tools to turn a bowl. I'm basically turning this bowl with 3 tools. I don't think I'm using any more than 3 tools. I'm using this 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. I'm using my 5/8 inch, which I used for roughing out the exterior. And I'm using a 3/8 inch spindle detail gouge. And that's for shaping the tenon dovetail primarily. And on this bowl, it helped clean out that little ledge for the lid. So we'll continue the process of working down that wall, and I will bring the center area down a little piece at a time. I would like to make a bigger slicing cut here, but this wood is so hard that that thickness that I'm cutting right now is about as thick as I can cut before the bowl gouge starts choking. You can tell when you're cutting too much because the bowl gouge isn't cutting, and you'll feel like a skipping motion or a sensation on the tip of the bowl gouge, and it's grabbing, and it might not be catching necessarily. It's not a formal catch, but it's just not cutting smoothly. When you're cutting smoothly, you'll feel it because it just glides across the surface like you're seeing here. It just glides across. But in order for it to glide across, you have to make a really thin slice because this wood is so dry and so hard. If I dig deep down in there and try to make a thick cut, it's gonna talk to me. it's gonna bark at me basically. So instead, I have to make these light passes, which takes a little bit longer, but you get a really good finish as a result. This wood is almost like porcelain when it's cut really smooth. It's very dense and very compact. It's actually creating a little bit of a sheen there from just this nice slicing cut. You can see the highlight from the light there. So keep working the center away and then working the wall thickness. And I'm stopping frequently and checking the wall thickness. I'm also not showing you all of the times that I'm sharpening. I probably sharpen my tools about 5 times during this turning, based on the fact that they're dulling so quickly with this hard wood. So I stop frequently and just use my fingers, the index finger and thumb, and feel up and down that wall thickness. If your bowl is larger than you can reach, then use calipers to determine that the wall thickness is even all the way throughout. You can hear a little bit of vibration happening there because I'm on this open wall, but what I'm doing here is I'm merging in all of those cuts. The bottom of the bowl is a little bit thicker than the top rim, and I use that opportunity just to merge all those cuts together. Now I want to show you this point of view. This is my point of view when I'm turning. I'm not bending down to look down inside the bowl. Instead, I'm looking at the curve of the exterior of the bowl, and I'm allowing the bowl gouge to follow that path. And I'm trusting, even though I'm not seeing the bowl gouge tip all the way down in there, I'm trusting that it's there in line with the exterior of that bowl. And then for the last portion of the center mass, just simply work across face cuts and just sneak up on that final wall thickness of the bowl, the bottom of the bowl. Now my intention was to ebonize this bowl and make it all black so that it really accentuated the lid. But as I'm turning this, I actually really like the wood grain of it. It's very subtle, but it's got a beautiful appearance to it, and I'm going to leave it in its natural form. I may do another ebonized bowl with some other material at some point, but for right now I'm going to leave this bowl natural. Very light cuts here. And now that was getting a little too thick. You can see I made it thinner there. And you want to go across that center slow so you don't rip out fibers. There we go. Okay, look at all those shavings. All right, so I'll get this sanded up. They're very even, curly shavings. And I'll go through all the grits and sand this. I'll start at 120, go to 180, 240, and 360. Those are increments that are increasing by 50%. If you want to learn more about sanding bowls, check out my video all about sanding bowls. And if you're new to this channel, I have a ton of videos that you need to check out. So go through my channel and check out my videos. I've got all kinds of different things, especially if you're just getting into bowl turning. There's a ton of things there, especially with the bowl gouge and some of the basic techniques of mounting bowls to the lathe. You're going to want to go through my video library. I have a playlist of bowl gouge videos that go through all the details of using the bowl gouge. All right, so the bowl's done. I'm going to use one of my cardboard templates that I use to cut bowl blanks with as kind of a guide. I know that I need to make that piece about the size of this blank, and the spalt is kind of located on this side, so it's gonna be a little wonky. This particular spalted blank is a little bigger than what I need, but I'm going to center it based on the spalt, not on the center of it. So you can see one side's a little bit heavier than the other. So right off, I'm going to even off this bowl blank so that I've got a round piece here and I'm not turning an oblong, wonky little bowl blank in here. So I'm using my 5/8 inch swept back bowl gouge here, 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, and I'm just hitting those high spots. This spalted wood is much softer than the magnolia. So I got to continuously tighten the tailstock, make sure that this piece stays in there. There we go, I'm getting a pretty good pass. And now the biggest trick with this is applying down pressure on the tool rest. It's hard to see here, but my left hand that you see there is pushing down on that tool rest. I'm not pushing into the bowl, I'm pushing down on the tool rest to maintain a straight path with the tool as I shift my body weight. I'm not pulling the tool and I'm not pushing it into the bowl. If I were to do that, I would just get incredible vibration because that high spot on the blank would just be pushing me the whole time. Instead, I'm forcing the tool to make a straight path no matter what comes at it. And it just so happens that it's getting hit every other time this bowl blank goes around. That doesn't matter to the tool. I'm just maintaining a straight path with it. All right, that's getting close to being trued up there. Now, the face that you see here is going to be the open lid for the bowl. And the plan is I'm going to make a tenon on this for right now so that I can reverse it and work the inside of the lid and then come back to the exterior of the lid. This is fun. I actually enjoy doing these type of projects because you really got to think through this. It's like a three-dimensional puzzle. It's like, what are you trying to achieve here? And you got to think through the steps 3 or 4 steps ahead, otherwise you're going to get stuck and you won't be able to mount something to the lathe potentially if you aren't thinking about how you're going to do this. So I've created a tenon. And now I'm going to create a shoulder for that tenon. And then I'm going to true up, or actually put the dovetail on the tenon here with my spindle detail gouge. Now this wood is older and punky. You can see on the end grain there, you can see how the tear out that's occurred. So what I did on the tenon is I applied some very super thin CA glue to the edges of the tenon to strengthen that material so this doesn't shear off. Plus I'm using the tailstock for added support. Okay, so now I'm going to work down the inside. This is the inside of the bowl, so it's going to have a convex shape going on the bottom here. This will be inside the bowl, which we really don't see very much until you lift the lid. Wow, look at that spalt. Spalted wood is just absolutely gorgeous. I was really happy to find the spalt inside that sycamore. I'm hoping that I said the species right, because I'm thinking of a variety of different trees. I work with a lot of spalted pecan. This is spalted sycamore, and the bowl is magnolia. Okay, so I'm making my final cut here from the center out. Now, why would I do that? Well, that's the supported grain direction. If you think about it, we're going through, this is just like making the exterior of the bowl. You start from the bottom of the bowl and you work up to the rim for a side grain mounted bowl. If you need to know more about grain direction, and it's super important, especially with a dry piece of wood like this, you want to really cut those end grain fibers and not damage them. You need to check out my video about supported grain direction. I'll put a link up above for that. Okay, so the bottom of the lid is set up. Now I need to create the diameter of the rim, or of the lid, and I need to create the recessed edge that's going to sit down into that lip. So what I'm going to do is I'm making light cuts here, and then I'm bringing the bowl up to see if it fits. It's really that simple. You can see I'm cut away a little bit of relief area, and I'll pull the tail or the tool rest out of the way and position the bowl. It's not quite there. You got to remember, you're taking off material on one side, but it's reducing the diameter by half of the cut. So you want to make really light cuts. There, we're very, very close. So I'm going to take a little bit of extra material away. And we're there. Okay, perfect. That's what I'm looking for. Very nice, nice smooth fit. That's the top. Now I need to create the recessed portion that's the inset of the bowl that this lid will set down on. So I'm going to bring the lid portion down to that thickness. You can see the fit there. Now I need to remove a little bit of material to accommodate for the inside lip on the bowl. And you can also see the convex shape of the bottom of the lid on the left side. Okay, so we have the bottom of the lid done. Now I'm going to remount the bowl. Now I made a mark on the tenon and on one of the jaws, and I'm going to do my best to realign that so that the bowl will turn true like it was before. That's one little trick you can do. And you can loosen the tail or the chuck and move that tenon around a little bit if you need to make sure that bowl turns as true as possible. Okay, so now the bowl has become a chuck for the lid. Nothing's holding that lid other than the bowl and sitting down inside the bowl. So I'm going to remove the lid material down to the height that I want inside that bowl. I'm just going to make light passes here. There's no need to be in a rush. You can see I'm working across the rim right into the lid so that the lid sits flush with the edge of the rim. And I'm also going down into this to make it concave. And I'll be using push cuts here to release some of the extra stress that I'm putting on the lid. Very light cuts, just sneaking up on the shape that I'm looking for. And the tenon that I created for the lid is no longer needed, so I'm just basically cutting that away as I'm making this shape. But that tenon area is going to become the handle for the lid. This spalted wood is absolutely gorgeous. There's the push cut. What's nice about the push cut is I'm directing all the force into the headstock, so it's a lot less tension on the bowl and the lid at this point, less chance of it getting dislodged. Just making a light pull cut with the bottom wing of the bowl gabs there. And I'll make a push cut all the way across. The spalted wood is absolutely gorgeous. Now, what's important to understand is spalt is not mold, it's not fungus, it's not dangerous. What spalt is are mineral deposits. There is a fungus that worked through the wood, but it left in its wake mineral deposits. It's not mold, and it won't hurt you, and the dust from it won't hurt you. Wood dust in general will cause more damage to your lungs and more health problems than anything that you will find in the spalt. So you don't have to worry about health issues with spalt. So I'm going to go ahead and sand the outside of this rim for the simple reason that of what I'm going to do next. Because I need to work that handle area, and I'm eventually going to need to move that tailstock out of the way. So essentially, the spalt is two different funguses that are working through the wood, basically consuming the sugars in the cells of the wood, and in its place and in their wake, they leave mineral deposits. And the spalted lines that you see and the different types of spalt that occur are based on the zones or the areas that at least two different competing funguses were occupying. So they were literally like the boundary lines of like a battle zone where spalt or fungus has been moving through the wood. When the wood is opened up like it is now and exposed to oxygen, all of the rot and decay stops. It's as if it's just goes on pause. And this wood will not continue to rot like it was previously in a log form. Okay, so obviously you can see I'm taping the lid very carefully and very securely to the bowl. Taking my time to make sure there's no wiggle room in here. I don't want that lid to be able to move at all. So I'm just going to take my time and really work this tape down very well. Now, what that's going to afford me to do is going to afford me the opportunity to take the tailstock out of the way in a minute and be able to shape this final handle. Now, there's something that's interesting with design, and it happens in life in lots of different ways. We actually hear it in music. If you listen to songs, a lot of times a song will have an introduction. It could be a particular melody, it could be particular lyrics. Poems are the same way, writing is that way. Start off with an initial thought or a sound or a design, and then it ends by repeating that thought or that sound. And so what I'm doing here is I'm creating this resonance of repeating the design. By the way, that area is a little bit fragile there, so I'm going to apply some thin CA to that so that it stiffens it up so we'll be able to turn it a little bit better and get a clean cut versus that ripped out ingrain. So what I'm getting at is I'm actually going to resonate or repeat the shape of the overall bowl in this little handle. Now I could make a ball shaped or a cylinder or a spherical shaped handle here, but that's not going to resonate. You're going to kind of look at a sphere sitting on top of the shape and go, okay, it's nice, but it's not quite right for some reason. I don't know why. But when we repeat a shape, our eye becomes at ease and our brain sees that shape as a repeating element, and we're okay with it. So what I'm doing here with the spindle detail gouge is I'm undercutting the bottom of this handle so that it mimics the shape of this bowl. And then I'm bringing the concave curve of the lid down to the base of this handle. Now proportionally, this handle is a little tall because it doesn't quite mimic the shape of the bowl. And of course, I also want to make sure that this will be easy to grab with your fingers and be able to lift the lid. I don't want to design it to a point where it doesn't actually work. It has to be functional. So you want to take a minute and go, okay, that'll work. I can pick it up. I want to be really careful here. I do have a pinch point because that tailstock's there. If I get a catch here, I could easily just snap this whole thing off. So what I'm doing is just a push cut into the headstock, which is going to be very little pressure on this. And I'm taking the top down to basically the same height proportionally of the bowl itself. And the lid of the bowl is concave, so we're going to make the top of this handle concave as well. I'm using the spindle detail gouge to get in there and do this last little bits. I'm a little concerned about taking this off and depending on just that tape, and I'm going to need to do that now. Okay, so the tailstock is gone. We are turning and depending on the blue masking tape at the moment. I'm going to continue. This is, again, mimicking the concave lid that's actually this handle is attached to. I'm going to go very light here so we don't rip out fibers. And there's our handle. And it's holding on. I'm going to take a little bit of time now to sand this up. And I'll work through all the grits on this as well. I'm not going to show it all here. Sanding is like watching paint dry, basically. And I also want to sand with the grain. And this is with the surface grain of the wood. That way I'm not leaving scratch marks. Okay, so with the lid sanded, I can take the tape off. I want to make sure it doesn't fall out of there. Look at that pattern. There's like a spotted pattern, a spalt on the top. That is just totally cool. And the lid fits very nicely. There's a little bit of an edge that's revealed on that, and I'm fine with that. It could have been a really snug fit, but I'd rather be a little bit open there and actually create a kind of a shadow line around it. Okay, I'm using a jam chuck now. And I put a piece of padding in there and reverse the bowl so I can finish the foot of the bowl. And we're going to take that tenon off. I'm basically going to use the shape of the shoulder as the foot for this particular bowl. My initial intention was to ebonize this, and I was probably going to do that with ink. So I wanted the shoulder to be the outside of the tenon. A lot of times I'll make a big shoulder on this that's kind of excessive. But what's nice about an excessively large shoulder is I can shape that foot however I want after the fact. In this particular case, I knew I was going to make the shoulder the foot. So I'm just removing the inside of the shoulder. Again, using push cuts down in towards the headstock creates the least amount of pressure on the connection here. Now I'm using my spindle detail gouge to get down in there to remove the little nib. And I want to make that inside of the foot concave so that the rim of the foot will sit really nice on the table and won't wobble. Just make a little push and turn the lathe off, and it'll cut those fibers, and we can sand the bottom of that up. And there's the bowl. Okay, let's get some finish in. Can anybody guess what kind of finish I'm going to use? Yeah, I'm using tried and true original finish. This is linseed oil and beeswax. That's it, nothing else. And we just need enough on the surface of the wood to see it on the surface of the wood. If it's any thicker than that, it's too much. So you just want a really thin coat on all of the wood surface. And the way tried and true works is you put a very thin coat on. You don't want any globbing excess. You let it sit for an hour. You come back and wipe it down really good. What you're doing in that hour, after an hour, is you're making sure that there's no excessive thick areas. And then you let it sit for 24 hours, and then you just buff it with a clean cloth, and that's it. And it creates this beautiful luster. It's not a real shiny, like you're seeing it shine here because it's just been applied, but it'll settle into the wood and it'll have a nice luster and allow the wood surface to really be the showcase. So I'm taking my time here and putting a good coat on this. Now this wood is a little bit more brittle and a little bit more fragile than the bowl itself, which is fine. And I really want to make sure I work that finish down into the ingrains. The ingrains are really dry, so it's kind of soaking it up. Spalted wood is absolutely beautiful to work with. Just want to make sure you cover all the areas. And there it is. A very subtle concave lid with a matching handle. Look at that spalt. My goodness. This never gets old. I can turn spalted wood forever. Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. That was sycamore. Sycamore is a really pretty plain and basic wood, but wow, with spalt, it's gorgeous. I love the shape. I'm really happy with this piece.
So here it is, a beautiful lidded bowl with spalted sycamore as the lid and magnolia as the bowl. I've got to tell you, I'm pretty happy with the results here. There's a couple little happy accidents in here. I intended for this rim to fit a little bit tighter, but I really like the space, the even space all the way around that. It kind of defines the lid and the differentiation between the magnolia and the spalted sycamore. Also, remember with wood turning, we're gonna have to be problem solvers. And really that's what makes it fun, because we've got to overcome some challenges. I knew that if I continued turning this knob, that it was probably going to just pop right off, because this wood right here is so delicate and it's getting punky. It's essentially going through its decomposition process. But with a little super thin CA, we were able to overcome that. And we used the masking tape as a chuck. I don't think I'd call masking tape a chuck. The bowl was the chuck. The masking tape helped hold that lid in place. But when we did the knob for the lid, there was nothing else holding this lid. So it's kind of fun to do these projects and think through how to solve the problems. If you like this video, do me a huge favor and click that like button below the screen. I greatly appreciate that. And subscribe to this channel if you're not already. If you're not subscribing, what's keeping you? I don't understand. Anyway, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. And check out my website, turnawoodbull.com, where I have the Turn a Wood Bull University. There are 3 courses available for you. There's tool sharpening, there's treatable green wood processing, and how to turn a wood bowl. So you're going to want to check those out. Some great resources to quickly accelerate through the wood bowl turning process. All right, guys, until next time, happy turning. It's time to make a lid with a bowl.